start recording. I'm recording. It's been so long since we've read this book. I feel like I just plowed through it last week, and now I took a hard break. And I think I might finish it today. I might. I'm not sure yet. But yeah, for Chandler, the last thing we left off at. Yes, we are. Okay, so we're on page 165. Actually, I probably won't finish it today, just because it is long. I don't know, maybe. But yeah, we're on page 65, and the last page is 218. So you can probably do the math on your own. But yeah, it's about 50 pages? 60? I don't know how to do math. But it's roughly something like that, right? So 165, 218. Yeah, 53 pages. 53 more pages to go. So probably I won't. I know, right? I probably won't finish it tonight. Or maybe I will. Maybe I'll just do it in 2 parts. Because I want to take a shower after I finish reading whatever I finish reading. However much I finish reading. So yeah. But yeah, we left off, the Kwong guy got killed by Charming, and Charming was just like, oh, escape with me, blah, 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 blah. And she's like, wait, no. I've got to stay here for longer for repentance or whatever. But she's gonna escape. She gonna escape. Yeah, I'm recording. Yeah. Okay. Hold on. All right. So, yeah, we're on chapter 24, and the last chapter, I think, it might be 31 or 32. No, it's 31. So, yeah, we're pretty close. Okay. So, here we go. Oops, that was loud. Yeah, and it's picking me up, right? Because I went to a conference, had a Zoom call. Yeah, it looks like it's picking me up, so that's good. Okay. So, chapter 24. I dozed fitfully, only deep enough into sleep to dream. I saw Kwong in the prince's bloody hands again and again. I think I cried out once or twice, but no one came to comfort me. I dreamed that Kwong rose again and came and stood over my bed. Then Kwong became the prince, reaching for me. I turned to him, forgetting my revulsion. Forgetting everything but that beautiful face and handsome body. But as soon as I touched his hand, he turned into Kwong. I screamed myself awake. Shaking, I sat up and wondered if I dared scramble over to the tunnel and make my escape. I wasn't concerned with anyone coming to investigate my screams. But what if someone came back for Kwong's body? I made myself tiptoe over to the door and peek out, staring into the darkness. I tried to make out a lump on the floor where Kwong had fallen, or a trail of blood, but I couldn't make out anything either way. I went back and looked up at the window, trying to evaluate how late it was. I was squinting more into more dark. was squinting into more darkness when I heard a blessed sound, the donging of the palace clock. Trembling, I counted carefully, as if everything depended on my accuracy. 1, 2, 3, 10, 11, 12. I laughed, almost with giddy. It was time. With a practiced air, I slid down the crap hole for the last time and shimmied into my tunnel, preferring speed over style. I'd made it barely wide enough, so preferring speed over style. I'd made it barely wide enough so that I had to perform a complicated dance maneuvering around the shovel and the bag of food Mary had brought me. The bag had grown light over the past 2 days, and I wished I could wait and restock it. Yeah, let me say that again. The bag had grown light over the past 2 days, and I wished I could wait to restock it. I also hated the thought of leaving without saying goodbye and thanking Mary. But nothing could make me stay a minute longer in the castle than I had to. Frantic with anticipation, I just thrust my shovel again and again into the roof of my tunnel, not pausing even to brush any away, not pausing even to brush away the clods of dirt that rained down on me. I got dirt in my eyes and kept shoveling. I got a splinter in my hand and ignored it. Then, finally, I felt something different and brushed my face with the falling soil. Something soft. Grass. Without thinking, I jumped up, my head bursting through what remained of my tunnel ceiling. The cool night air felt like a caress against my face. I had to stifle a shriek of glee. I was out. Caution overtook me after a second. I crouched and looked carefully around. There were lanterns at intervals along the castle wall behind me, but I saw no guards. I reached back into my tunnel and grabbed my food bag. When I noticed the shovel, my best friend for 5 days, now nearly forgotten, I picked it up to take along too, just in case it would incriminate Mary. I liked the notion of leaving people wondering how I'd gotten out. Let them think I dug through the crap hole with my fingernails. I grinned, remembering how the prim ladies-in-waiting always reacted in horror if anyone broke a fingernail during needlepoint. Yeah, you can also use this. Yeah, that's what I was thinking too. In case she gets into trouble, escaping. Remembering how the prim ladies-in-waiting always reacted in horror if anyone broke a fingernail during needlepoint. I wanted my hands to be more useful than that. I wanted my life to be more useful. I wanted my life to be more useful than that. But just what was I going to do with it now? That is the end of chapter 2024. Tactical shovel! Dude, those things are cool. Like what Markiplier has, it's fucking neat. And it's so sharp too. Alright, so chapter 25. Alright. If I'd been Jed, I probably could have stood there by my tunnel for hours, pondering the point of my life. But I didn't have that luxury. I was out of the dungeon, but certainly not out of danger. Trying to stay in the darkness as much as possible, I crept along the castle wall to the boulevard that it faced. But the boulevard was wide and open and lit by ever-burning torches. I found an alley instead. As I inched my way through the shadows, stepping on a cat's tail once, knocking over garbage pails twice. I tried to formulate a plan. The first thing I had to do was get rid of my dress. Though a bit soiled by a week in the dungeon, it was still clearly a royal thing, made in made with shimmery gold thread and with no common clothes fitted as no common clothes were. Anyone who saw me in it would notice, but a girl running around naked would stand out even more. I prayed for the sight of a clothesline, with even a peasant tunic hanging on it. But then I stepped in a puddle up to my ankles, bringing back an awareness of weather that I'd totally forgotten in the castle. Puddles meant that Puddles meant it had rained, which meant no self-respecting peasant would have laundry hanging out. And anyhow, I would have felt bad about stealing something that may have been some poor woman's only belonging. It wasn't like I had. Hold on. It wasn't. Oh, yeah. It wasn't like I could have left her my dress in trade. I had to go to Lucille's. Even as I adjusted my course, turning down one alley after another, trying to head for the edge of the city that surrounded the castle, I marveled that I was thinking of the house I'd grown up in as Lucille's now, not as mine. I'd lived in the castle only 2 months. Was that all it took for me to relinquish my home? Of course, I'd left without a backward glance when the prince was at my side, and I thought he was the man of my dreams. But now, I considered my emotions the way someone with a pulled tooth might explore the hole in his tongue. It was true. My fervor was gone. Home wasn't home anymore. I slipped into the countryside beyond the city, and reflected that it was good. I wasn't longing for home anymore. My old house would be the least safe place for me to stay. Once morning came and they started looking for me, I'd never be able to go home again. Hold on. This thought did cause me a pang, but I only walked faster. I was following the same path I had taken the night of the ball, and that had been in early spring, and now it was the height of summer. The leaves that were only beginning to bud were now full-fledged and luxurious. As I ducked under a low branch, one leaf came off against my shoulder. Whimsically, I picked it up, planning to tuck it into my bag as a memento, but it was dry and prematurely dead. Shivering, I dropped it. I took it as a sign almost. What if my life were abbreviated like that leaf's? Surely my time in the castle wouldn't be all the spring and summer I ever got. I reached the outskirts of my old village, trying not to remember how carefree and happy. Hold on, sorry. Let me just adjust myself. I'm sorry for people that are hearing all sorts of noises. Okay. Okay. Where was I? I was at. Yeah. Surely my time in the castle wouldn't be all the spring and summer I ever got. I reached the outskirts of my old village, trying not to remember how carefree and happy I'd felt leaving it 2 months earlier. Confused. Sorry, I had to stop and had to read that. You're gonna think it's funny too. A confused cock crowed as I entered the main square, and I hid behind a barrel by the store. But nobody stirred, and after a moment, I had continued on my way. Maybe not. Even in the moonlight, my old house looked even in the moonlight, my old house looked untended. The garden in the front was overgrown with weeds, and a few shingles had fallen from the roof. I left to myself as I eased the gate open. So couldn't take care of it without me. I wondered if she ever put Cormund or Griselda to work on it, or if she'd have to break down and, or if she'd have to break down and hire help. I went around to the back for fear of being spotted from the street. I picked the lock on the door with a hairpin, feeling grateful that I'd learned how to do that one hot summer day when I was 8 and bored. The door creaked a bit upon opening, but I didn't worry. Corman and Griselda were sound sleepers, and Lucille's room was far away, at the front of the house. Ugh. Yeah, at the front of the house. I tiptoed up the back stairs and into Corman's room. I heard her soft snore and was reassured as I searched through her wardrobe. She was slightly less huge than Griselda, and therefore the better one to take a dress from. In the dark, I chose at random and hoped I'd picked nothing that displayed Corman's penchant for fabrics and gargantuan splashy flowers. Back in her doorway, the garment clutched in my hand. I hesitated. I thought of I thought of going up to the attic and retrieving my mother's wedding dress, just for sentiment's sake. But for me, that dress would always be connected with the night of the ball, and that was no longer a pleasant memory. Instead, I turned down the hall to my father's old study. After he died, Lucille had ordered me again and again to remove and box up the hundreds of books that I lined the walls, and again I refused. And that was one battle I had won. I couldn't entirely prevent Lucille from disposing of my father's most treasured possessions, but I certainly wasn't going to help. I didn't dare light a lamp in the study, but there was enough moonlight to show that the bookshelves were still full. Thank goodness for Lucille's laziness. I ran my fingers across the spines of the books, almost weeping with relief. I grabbed a book at random and hung it to my chest. How I'd missed the books at the castle. I resisted the urge to start sweeping books into my bag. I had to be selective. I picked 10 books and then narrowed the choice to 6. Books were heavy, and I was going to have a long way, to walk. If I acted upon the idea, if I acted upon the idea that had begun flitting around my brain. Wait, hold on. Let me read that again. I was not paying attention. Books were heavy, and I was going to have a books were heavy, and I was going to have a long way to walk. If I acted upon the idea that had begun flitting around my brain, three of the books I chose were entirely pragmatic: an atlas and a physician's textbook, and a volume of plant and animal husbandry. Two were completely frivolous: a collection of poems I had practically memorized anyway, and a book of stories my father had read to me before I learned to read myself. The sixth book was philosophy. With these volumes snugly packed in my bag, I looked around one last time, then crept out of the room and down the stairs. I stopped once more at the pantry and took as much food as I could carry. They owed me, I reminded myself, and pickings might be slim where I was going. In the dark of the pantry, I also slipped my royal gown off and pulled Cormund's dress over my shoulders. It was enormous. I had to rip a swath. I had to rip a swath. Bon, I had to rip a swath off the bottom to belt it around my waist. I could alter it later. I went into the parlor and dug a needle. Yeah, I went into the parlor and dug a needle and thread out of a sewing basket that probably hadn't been touched since I'd left with the prince. Shoving my old gown into my already bulging pack, I considered leaving a note for Lucille and the Stepevils to warn them that the royal idiots would be looking for me, but they'd find out soon enough. I didn't owe Lucille any explanations, and it wasn't like the Stepevils would be in danger. Even at their cruelest, I didn't think the so-called Charmings would punish Lucille for my desertion. No, I decided I shouldn't take the time. I shouldered my pack and stepped out the back door, pulling it shut behind me, but the latch jammed, probably because of my picking the lock. I didn't feel particularly guilty about that, but I could easily have walked. But I could easily have walked it away. But something made me want to shut the door good and tight on Lucille and the Stepevils. I let my pack slide to the ground and swung the door open again to Jimmy the knob from the inside. That's when I heard the footsteps. So, Lucille jeered, the princess has returned. That is the end of chapter 25. Ah! Ah! Ah, shit, dude. Her hubris. Hold on. Okay. Alright, chapter 26. Yeah, chapter 26. I whirled around in a panic. You never wake up at night, I protested. Lucille smirked. So how many nights did you spend sneaking out to visit paramours? I was right. You never were anything but a piece of gutter trash, and now that prince has used you and cast you aside, just as I predicted. At least my real daughters listen to their mother. I ran away, I said. Lucille looked me up and down, her glittering eyes taking in the dirt on my face and in my hair. I held my breath, fearing she'd comment upon Corman's dress, but evidently it was too dark for her to notice, and she was too caught up in her mockery of my morals. Even you're not a big enough fool to run away from a prince, she sneered. You have to come up with a cleverer story than that. But it matters not. Everyone will know what happened. You'll be the talk of this village tomorrow, she sighed with a pretense of compassion. Well, only a saint would take you back under these circumstances, but I have been looking for a servant. You may begin by fetching me my stomach elixir. That's what I came down here for in the first place. Something at supper didn't agree with me. My jaw dropped. She wasn't even curious. I almost felt sorry for her. Her life was so small. If I told her everything, she wouldn't be able to grasp it. And then, Lucille continued, you may scrub the kitchen floor. I want it clean by morning. I am not your servant. I will never be your servant again. I hope you and Corman and Griselda die in your own filth, I said. And then I turned and ran, stooping to grab my bag and as I zoomed by. Wait! Stop! Is that something of mine you're taking? Thief! Help! Thief! I ran faster, the bag thumping against my back. Lucille made no attempt to follow me. I knew she wouldn't, but she screamed louder. Stop! Thief! Help! Runaway servant! I prayed that the neighbors were all sleeping soundly, or at least wouldn't feel like rousing themselves for Lucille. That was a fairly safe bet. I crouched through the back gate and into the woods beyond. I stepped into the creek that ran through our village and listened, my heart pounding. Lucille's shouts were distant, and there were no answering bellows. I heard mostly crickets. Trembling, I pulled my royal gown from my bag and let it slide into the water. It caught on a rock and then slithered forward, shimmering gold into the moonlight. The color reminded me of Prince Charming's hair. I tried not to think about how happy I'd expected to be ever after with everything shining around me. I watched the dress until it floated out of sight. Go far north, I whispered. Cover for me. It suddenly struck me that north was the way to Demulia, the country the palace officials pretended I was from. Maybe someone had actually believed the story and would look in that direction first. If they found the dress, it might buy me enough time to get where I was really going. I turned and began walking south toward the Swan border. And that's the end of chapter 26. Fuck, dude. Fuck. What's gonna happen? Okay. Okay, so chapter 27. That first night was the hardest. I knew I had to cover far more territory than they'd expected me to, but I'd already wasted half the night. At first, I fretted. Will Jed really take me in at the refugee camp? But after a few miles, my mind shut off, and all I could do was concentrate on walking, convincing exhausted muscles they would survive another step, and another, and another. I stepped out of the creek when it turned westward 4 miles south of my village. After hours in the water, my feet were numb, and surely the water had covered my tracks. but surely the water had covered my tracks. I worried about the muddy footprints I had left along the creek stopped to wash them behind me. When I skulked, then I skulked along the fence rows and forests until I saw the first glow of dawn on the horizon. I was on the edge of another village then, much too close for my taste. I could hear cocks beginning to crow, horses neighing in their stalls. I circled wide, stumbling through the wheat fields. All I wanted to do was lie down and sleep. Did I dare hide in the wheat? It wasn't harvest time yet, and why would anyone investigate the field? I looked behind me at the trail of bent wheat plants. Oops. I found a path where I could leave no tracks and ran along it. Finally, as the sun appeared, I came to a ramshackle barn that obviously had been abandoned years before. I shoved my way in, praying for soft hay. There was none, only a row of barrels. I rolled one over on its side and crawled into it, pulling my dress out, pulling my dress around my feet. I hold on. I fell asleep instantly and didn't wake up until dusk. I followed that pattern, traveling by day, uh, traveling by night, sleeping by day. For so many days, I lost count. I slept in haystacks, corn cribs, caves, and once, show when no better option showed up, on a tree limb. That choice almost proved disastrous because I started rolling off the limb whenever I nodded off. I didn't get much sleep that day and was stumbly and stupid the following night, but mostly I slept well. My body didn't protest the reversal of day and night at all, probably because I'd been working by night in the dungeon as well. By the third night, I began walking long before dusk, which allowed me to work on the second part of my plan, studying the medical and agricultural books. In my mind, I played over and over again the scene of me arriving at Judd's refugee camp. I wouldn't beg. I would state my case calmly and clearly. It is a risk to you to have me here, but I can be very useful too. I can treat the wounded people. I can teach them how to grow more food, and nobody will recognize me now. I was sure of that. I left burrs in my hair and dirt on my face like camouflage, and Corman's dress, which did indeed sport roses the size of cabbages, quickly grew so ragged and dirty the pattern was barely invisible. The pattern was barely visible. Nobody saw me. I saw nobody, except at a great distance in the dark. And then, and then I always hid or got off the path to avoid them. But by day, I sometimes heard voices. I always woke in a panic, fearing they belonged to King. Cannot talk. What was I doing? What was I saying? What was I? By Okay, let me just start from the beginning. Nobody saw me. I saw Nobody saw me. I saw nobody except at a great distance in the dark, and then I always hid or got off the path to avoid them. By day, I sometimes heard voices. I always woke in a panic, fearing they belonged to the king's soldiers, come to find me. But each time I was wrong, and I fell back to sleep, listening to children playing games, women gossiping as they picked elderberries, men boasting as they scythed hay. The voices made me feel lonelier still. I had been an outsider at the castle. I had been an outsider with the steppe evils. Even as a child, happy with my father, I had known we were different from all the other families. Would I ever, would I ever find where I belonged? Sometimes, walking through the night, I thought back on the choices I'd made and where they'd led me, and somehow I did not regret any of them. Promising to marry the prince had turned out to be a bad idea, but life in the castle had certainly been an experience. I'd met Mary, he was the truest friend I could hope for, and I'd met Jed, who I didn't let myself examine my feelings for Jed. All I could hope for was that he'd save my skin. Whenever I started thinking about him, I forced myself to concentrate on reviewing medical treatments. How do you treat how do you treat snake bite? I quizzed myself. What's the best way to set a broken arm? But as the days passed, I longed to have someone to talk to about my life, past, present, and ever after. At first, I thought of Mary, who always listened so devotedly, but listening wasn't all I wanted. I wanted advice. I wanted someone older and wiser. More and more, I wished that, before Lucille had caught me that night, I escaped from the castle. I had had the sense to go next door and talk to my former neighbor, Mrs. Branson, who, in the midst of caring for her, brood, had given me all the mothering I'd ever gotten. What is love, anyway? I wanted to ask. I'd obviously been wrong about how I felt for Prince Charming, since it had soured so soon. Would I recognize real love if I ever found it? Did I even want it? It seemed easier to go through life the way my father had between my mother's death and Lucille's arrival, devoted to knowledge, not emotion. How do you treat a snake bite? What's the best way to set a broken arm? But but didn't I want my life to be something more than easy? You'd think with all the time I had to ponder everything, I'd have come up with some answers. But all I accomplished to walk to walk by night, sleep by day, and learn medicine and agriculture. And then came the day I heard soldiers. And that is the end of chapter 27. Oh my god, I think we might actually finish it. I think so. I think we might actually finish it. She's gonna fucking die. Dude, don't jinx it. Okay. Chapter 28. Yeah, chapter 28. At sunup that day, I had chosen a hiding place in a meadow along the road. I knew it wasn't the safest spot, but nothing else was available, and the grass was so tall it didn't look like anyone ever scythed it. I just hoped no one picked that day for the first cutting. Judging by the position of the sun, it was just afternoon when I awoke to the tramping of feet. Company! Halt! Dozens of feet pounded to the ground at once. Fall out! Their sounds weren't so organized after that. The soldiers seemed to be stomping all over the place. I froze as I heard some of them scrambling up the bank near me. Thought they'd march us straight to Swallow all this morning. This probably is Swallow now. We probably lost half the territory while we were away. So these soldiers weren't looking for me, but they were simply on their way to fight Swallow. But why were they climbing toward me? Psst. I heard the sound of several bladders being relieved at once. Oh, I was safe as long as I didn't get wet. I hoped the soldiers would go back to the road when they were done, but they didn't. They flopped down on the ground nearby and began ordering people around. See? I told you there'd be peasants around here, one muttered. Then he shouted, Peasant, bring us a feast. Feast? A trembling voice replied, We have no feast, only common food, and not much of that. You soldiers have taken it all. Feed us or else. I didn't know what the soldier did. Drew a sword, grabbed the peasant by the neck. But the peasant immediately began stammering. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. The soldiers laughed. In a short while, I began to smell the irresistible aroma of cooking meat. Since I'd been living on stale bread, hard cheese, and the odds and ends of fruit, I could pick up along the way. And the odds and ends of fruit I could pick up along the way. My mouth began watering almost unbearably. It was torture to listen to the soldiers smacking their lips and chewing and belching. Finally, though, I heard one proclaim, Aye, peasant, I knew that you could find a way to feed us. Fine victuals, I must say. Ought to be, the peasant mumbled. That was all we had stored for the winter. Oh? Oh, the old soldier said, as if he truly cared not. Then I suppose we owe you something. How about a story? A story? A story? Perhaps only I could tell how hard the peasant was trying not to sound scornful. Aye. We have been at the prince's wedding. It was a good thing I was already lying down, because that statement would have knocked me to the ground. What could he mean? I knew Prince Charming was the only prince around. How could he have found someone else so fast? I didn't love him and was glad not to be marrying him, but still. Evidently, one of the peasant women was practically as stunned as I was. You haven't, she declared. Bunch of filthy fighting men like yourselves wouldn't be invited to any royal wedding. We're too, the soldier countered. We were the royal battalion, one of them anyway. There were 100 rows of us marching with the prince's carriage, and another 100 with the princess's. Did you see the princess? The woman asked wistfully. Was she beautiful? I peeked through the glass. Sorry, I'm just rearranging myself. I peeked through the glass. Why do I want to say glass? It's grass. I peeked through the grass and saw the woman asking the questions. She was old and toothless, her hair ridden. She was old and toothless, her hair hidden in a kerchief. Her shoulders stooped with years of hard labor. She couldn't have been waiting for the soldier's answer any more eagerly than I was. We were too far back, the soldier said, and she had a veil over her face. There were those flowers, too, another soldier reminded him. Yeah, they had a bunch of flowers all over the place, blocking our view. Not to be deterred, the woman asked, What kind of flowers? How am I to know? I'm a soldier, not a gardener. Orchids, someone else contributed. The first soldier wasn't done speaking. But I'll tell you, even if I didn't see her, I know that princess must be about the most beautiful woman ever. Did you hear the story about her? She was just this commoner living with her close stepmother and stepsisters after her father died. And then the prince gave a ball and the stepmother wouldn't let this girl go. I got chills. I could hardly listen. Cinderella, everyone called her. Because she had to sleep in the cinders and was filthy all the time. That's not true, I wanted to protest. Only Cormund and Griselda called me that. And it was Cinder's Ella, anyway. And I took baths more often than either of them. So I was hardly filthy. I pressed my lips together to make myself stay silent. So, after her stepmother and stepsisters left for the ball, Cinderella lay weeping in the ashes, and suddenly the fairy godmother appeared. I lay numb for the rest of the story. I'd never heard all the details before, only whispered bits and pieces of the palace and the abbreviated tale Jed had told me. In its entirety, the story was even more ridiculous than I had supposed. Why in the world would I have had mice as friends? And if I already had a horse, why wouldn't my supposed fairy godmother bother turning the mice into horses? The absurdities went on and on. The soldier finally ended, and at the wedding, they pledged to love each other forever and live happily ever after. Oh, the pleasant woman sighed breathlessly. I just love a good romance. The soldier snorted. You women, he said, but he had a you women, he said, but he had a softness to his voice, as if he liked the story too, even if he wouldn't admit it. I gripped the grass with my hands, angry beyond words. These people had been tricked so badly. I didn't know who they'd found to stand to stand in my place at the wedding. I didn't really care, but people should know there wasn't a fairy godmother involved in the true story. They should know the prince wasn't exactly charming at all, after all. And nobody had an ant's chance in an elephant stampede of living happily ever after with him. Maybe it was possible for people to fall in love and marry and be happy together, but my story hardly proved the point. So why were these lies being spread? Formation! An official sounding voice snapped from across the road. The soldiers scurried into position, and in a few moments I heard them marching on again. I still lay tense and worried while the peasants cleaned up behind them, but soon they left too. I strained my ears, but I could hear nothing but the buzz of insects and the whoosh of wind blowing through the grass. I was safe again. I had not been discovered, but I couldn't get back to sleep. After days of sleeping without problem on rocks, hay, roots, and assorted other discomforts, I was suddenly unable to settle down on the soft grass beneath me. The heat made my head ache, and I had a strange urge to cry. I opened the medical book to study since I couldn't sleep, but the words only swam before my eyes. Why did everyone like that story so much when it wasn't true? Why was everyone so eager to believe it? Was it because in real life, ever afters generally suck? Would mine? And that is the end of chapter 28. 28! Oh my god, we're so close to being done. Alright. Chapter 29. Also, I got another subscriber yesterday. Thank you so much. Well, I don't want to put you on blast, but thank you, Nate. I think that's the new subscriber. Yeah, Nate. Thank you so much. I hope you enjoy the videos. But now I'm at 4 subscribers, which is pretty damn. Or no, 5? I forget. I think I have. I'm not sure. My channel. I have 4 subscribers. Nice. So it's Chandler Smiley. Nice. Thank you. Now back to reading. Alright, chapter 29. In 2 nights' time, I was close enough to the swollen border to hear the sounds of battle. I had read about plenty of wars in my father's books, but no book could have prepared me for the screams of anguish and terror I heard every day when I hid and tried to sleep. 1,000 times over, I pictured the prince slaying Kwong, the only killing I'd ever witnessed. I remembered my father dying while crossing the swollen border, all because one side thought he might be a spy for the other. It's not worth it, I whispered in my abandoned sheds and dusty haystacks. This land is not worth dying for. I decided that Jed, for the first time in his life, had focused on too small an issue. He shouldn't be helping the refugees. He should be helping to end the war so there would be no more refugees. I reminded myself I had a more immediate problem than the swollen war. I still puzzled over the story the soldier had told to the peasants. Had the wedding really taken place without me? And if so, what did that mean? If so, did that mean I was safe? Or at least safer? I decided it did. The morning of the 3rd day after I'd heard the soldiers, something like the 14th day of my escape from the palace, I'd allowed myself to be seen. I kept walking after daybreak until I came to a man working in a field. Please, sir, could you tell me, after 2 weeks of talking to no one but myself, my voice was rusty. Could you tell me how to get to a place where they help people who have lost their homes in the war? Let me say that again. Could you tell me how to get to the place where they help people who have lost their homes in the war? He looked up slowly. His Rumi? I think it's Rumi? Yeah, I think it's Rumi. It's spelled weirdly. There we go.
Rumi.
Yeah, it's Rumi. He looked up slowly, his roomy eyes heavy with a look I couldn't understand at first. Ye lost your home now? Ye lost your home now? He started. He thought I was one of the refugees. He pitied me. He pitied me. I cannot talk for whatever reason. Oh, am I okay? Yeah, I'm good. You lost your home now. He started. He thought I was one of the refugees. He pitied me. Why is that so hard for me to say? He pitied me. Pitied. I am having I feel like I'm not saying it right. Turned me into putty. Yeah, exactly. Fucking rip, dude. pitied me. I rushed to explain. No, no, I'm not. That is. I looked down at Carmen's dress, hanging loosely from my frame. Somehow I'd never bothered altering it. That hardly mattered now. After all my nights traveling, the dress was filthy and ragged beyond repair. I touched my hair, filled with brambles and dirt. I touched my face, streaked with mud and sweat. No wonder he took me for a war refugee. I looked white. I looked like one. I felt I felt ashamed and I felt ashamed of appearing so needy, but I decided not to correct his error. I had lost my home after all, just not because of the war. That place you're talking about, the man said. It's up the roads a ways. Turn left at the crooked tree. You'll see it. People have worn a path there. He hesitated. I don't usually do this, because I can't be feeding every Tom, Dick, and Harry that comes along. But do you need food before you go? I didn't realize I looked that bad. No, thank you, I said, trying to sound dignified. His a ways turned out to be an entire morning's walk. Again and again, I fretted that I'd missed the crooked tree, not exactly the easiest landmark to find. I puzzled over several lightly gnarled elms and one twisted pine. When finally I came to an apple tree growing at an almost 45-degree angle to the ground, I noticed the path beyond it. I noticed the path beside it before I noticed the tree. The path was wide and beaten down, its dirt packed as firmly as that of the road as that of the road I was on. Jed evidently had lots of vid- Jed evidently had lots of visitors. I turned down the path and walked perhaps half a mile before a long, low building appeared over the next rise. Knots began to sigh in my stomach. If Jed didn't let me stay, where else could I go? I looked down at my dress again and wished I could find a crepe to wash it in, but I was too close now to put up with any delays, and there wasn't a creek in sight. And I had to make sure no one would recognize me as the missing princess, if anybody knew. And I had to make sure no one would recognize me as the missing princess, if anybody here knew I was missing. I reached the gate by the build. Oh, fuck. Um. Hold on just 1 second. Where was I? I reached the gate by the building in no time. It held no sign announcing the camp's purpose, but I could see dozens of people inside the gate. A row of men were cutting silage. Silage?
Silage.
Silage. Okay. A row of men were cutting silage, while others stood around tanning animal skins, chopping firewood, or at the very least, whittling. Whitt- Whittling, yeah. At the end at the other end of the yard, women were kneading bread, sewing clothes, and stirring boiling vats of what smelled like lye soap. It seemed to be it seemed to be a very busy, happy place, except that when people raised their heads to look at me, I saw vacant eyes and faces etched with sorrow. These people hadn't just heard the war, they had seen it. Excuse me, I said to one of the women. I'm looking for Jed Reston. Silently, she pointed toward the main building. I stepped in to see the rows of beds like a dormitory. This evidently was the children's domain during the day. Some played some played hide and seek while uh, some played hide and seek among the bedding, but others were sitting still, staring into space. I'm trying to find Jed Reston, I said to a girl about my age. She looked to be too. Uh, I said to a girl about my age who looked to be babysitting. Office is over there, she said with the kind of insolent shrug I'd used so often on Lucille. I knocked at the door office. A woman's voice called in a. Hold on. Just adjusting. Okay. Office is over there, she said with the kind of insolent shrug I'd used so often on Lucille. I knocked at the office door. A woman's voice called a cheery, "Come in! I need to see Jed Reston," I repeated once again when I'd entered and found only a plump, middle-aged woman seated at the desk before me. "Oh, no, you don't," she replied, still cheery. "You just check in with me, that's all you have to do. We'll get you set up right. We'll get you set right up." So I was mistaken for a refugee once again. For a split second, I considered going along with the charade. I could probably manage to keep Jed from ever seeing me. I pictured my future, set out to some patch of farmland, safely away from the war, safely away from the castle and Lucille. But I could have my own hut, raise my own food. It might not be bad. But I did want to see Jed. I wanted to tell him everything that had happened, asking him questions, ask him his opinions, find out how his dream was turning out. I couldn't come this far and hide from him. "You don't understand," I told the two cheerful women. "I'm not a refugee. I'm an old friend of Jed's. Could someone tell him that, Ella is here?" I just hoped Jed would recognize my non-royal name. The woman narrowed her eyes, not missing my hesitation. I think she took me for some unsavory companion from his past, one he was better off rid of. And perhaps that was true, though not for the reason the woman imagined. If the prince found out I was here, it wouldn't be good for Jed. "And will he want to see you?" she asked. "I think so," I said. "Yes." The door behind me pushed open. I turned around to see the intruder, and it was Jed. He stopped short at the sight of me. "Ella!" he breathed in a voice that made my heart beat fast and my head feel light. I didn't realize Jed could have that effect on me. But I was so exhausted and hungry, my body's reactions weren't very reliable. I tried to recall what I'd planned to say to convince him to let me stay. I ran away, I started. I I remember the woman at the desk. I turned around and saw she was leaning forward, listening intently. Mrs. Meal, could you go check on the bedding supply? Jed asked. I just counted all the blankets yesterday, she replied. Count them again, Jed ordered. He had a tone in his voice I'd never heard back at the castle. He seemed more confident, older. But, Mrs. Meal still protested. Jed gave her a look that silenced her immediately. She slunk out of the door with an injured air. Jed took my hands in his. Are you all right? Are you all right? He asked. You look a little worse for wear. A little worse for wear? I finished his sentences. I finished his sentence ruefully. Digging out from a dungeon will do that to a girl. So will 2 weeks. So will walking for 2 weeks. Jed looked confused. But a writer came out and told us about the wedding only yesterday. He said it took place last Friday. There may have been a wedding, I retorted, but I wasn't there. I told him my story. I think I must have gotten some of it a little garbled because he stopped me after a few moments, put his arm around me, and led me to a couch. Then he put his head out the door and called, Ermeline, can you bring me a bowl of that stew left over from lunch? I ate like a starving person, which I basically was. Then I continued my tale. Jed interrupted only once more. They had Kwong guarding you? He protested when I reached that part. But he was sentenced to death weeks ago. What for? I asked. Rape. Jed looked away. Many of them. I took a shaky breath. I guess he got a stay of execution until the prince could deliver the sentence personally. Oh, Jed. Kwong was just a prop to them. Something to scare me into submission. And then they actually thought I'd leap into the prince's arms with joy, seeing him slaughter Kwong. They didn't know you very well, Jed murmured. Even with the stew making me feel steadier, I couldn't quite read Jed's expression. I hurried through the rest of the story and finished up. So you can see there aren't very many places in the kingdom that I'd be welcome. And I know I might be endangering you and your cause by coming here. But I did study those books, and I know I would be useful. Oh, Ella. Jed hugged me tight. You should have known I would never turn you away. But I have a better plan. He slid down and crouched on the floor before me. Awkwardly, he put first his right knee on the ground, then his left. Then he raised his right knee again and leaned toward me. I couldn't figure out what he was doing. He took my hands in his once more. Ella? He said solemnly. Will you marry me? And that is the end of chapter 29. Boy, what is gonna happen? I forget what happens. Oh, oh, you don't know about this? You think it's like a trap? Man, who knows? I think we're gonna finish it right now. Yeah, I think we're gonna finish it. Cause I can. And it's only the last 20 pages too, so okay. Okay. So chapter 30. I jerked my hands back in shock. What? I asked. Jed looked sheepish, but persevered. I want you to marry me, he repeated. I don't need that kind of charity, I said sulkily. Who would have ever thought, for all that I always said, I didn't. Let me say that again. Who would have ever thought, for all that I'd always said I didn't care about marriage, I kept getting the most unexpected offers. Jed raised his earnest face toward mine. To my surprise, he had tears sparkling in his eyes. It's not charity, he said. Don't you know? I've been in love with you since that first day I met you. From the moment you opened that door, when I came to tutor you. I remembered the thundershock look on his face. No offense, I said, but I'm not too impressed with the concept of love at first sight right now. You heard where it got me. Anyhow, I don't exactly look the way I did then. So, can you forget that sight? So you can forget that sight. Jed reached up and touched my face. I didn't move away. I was trying to decide if I liked it. I was trying to decide if I liked it. You still look beautiful to me, he said softly. But it's not your looks I'm in love with. Or, he corrected himself, not just them. It's your personality and your sense of humor, your courage, your perseverance, your intelligence. Basically everything about you. You sure had a funny way of showing your love, I grumbled. Why didn't you tell me before? You were betrothed to the prince, he said. I thought you loved him. I thought so too, I admitted. But you knew he was a jerk and a fool. Why didn't you tell me? Jed only looked at me. I thought about how it would sound if he told me any time at the palace. I love you, and oh, by the way, that guy you're engaged to is a lout. Okay, I said. I guess that wouldn't have worked. I thought about the awkward silences that had developed between me and Jed, the questions he'd avoided answering, the moments I had wondered how he could suddenly seem as distant as the prince himself. It must have been torture for you. Jed nodded silently. A moment passed before he admitted softly, I couldn't stand to call you princess, or hear anyone else refer to you as princess, because that reminded me you would never be mine. So in my mind, you were always just Ella. when I thought of you, which was about 27 hours a day, sometimes when we were together, I I wanted so badly to give up the pretense and pull you into my arms and, well, you know, I'd make you I'd make myself call you princess to hold myself back. I remember, I said softly. And when I was given permission to build the camp, all I wanted to do was come and tell you. But I knew if I did, I'd forget myself and throw myself at your feet and beg you to come along. So I didn't even say goodbye. I noticed, I said dryly. You would have had you would have had trouble finding me in the dungeon. I'm sorry, Jed said. I didn't know. Obviously. He shook his head as if trying to shake off the past. But that's over now. But that's over, and we're together now. His eyes shone with hope, waiting for my reply. Then he winced, and I realized he was crouching on the floor for an awfully long time. Why don't you get up? I asked. I think you I think you only have to make the proposal on a bended knee. You can be comfortable to hear the answer. Oh, okay. Jed sounded relieved as he got up and sat beside me. He started to reach for my hand again, but stopped himself. And the answer is? His hands were suspended, mid-reach. I thought about it. I had to believe he really did love me. Did I love him? I didn't feel for him the way I'd felt for the prince back when I thought I loved him, but I knew now that that had been infatuation with an ideal, not love for a real human being. Jed was real. I knew his faults as well as his virtues and didn't mind them. I enjoyed being with him. I had certainly rushed to find him as soon as I could. Of all the men I'd ever met, he was the one I'd want to marry the most. But I was only 15. I hadn't really met that many men. And beyond that, I hadn't really figured out what I wanted to do with my life. Marriage can determine what was possible or impossible. What if, after a few years, Jed and I turned out to have goals as mismatched as my father's and Lucille's? I looked away because I couldn't bear to watch Jed's face when he heard what I had to say. The answer is, I don't know, or I made the mistake of turning toward him. I caught a glimpse of his crestfallen face. I looked down at my hands, still alone in my lap. Jed had drawn back. I made myself look directly at him. The best thing I could say is, I can't make any promises yet. I thought I loved the prince, and I thought I was doing the right thing, agreeing to marry him. So what good can my judgment be? But you learned from that, Jed protested. You know me better than you knew him. True, but when I agreed to marry him, I was thinking mainly of getting away from and getting back at Lucille. Now I'm trying to escape the prince. If I were to marry you, wouldn't you rather it be because I'm trying to get to you instead of away from someone else? Why can't it be both? Why can't it be both? Jed joked. I only shook my head and then added, can't you give me 6 months and ask again? There was a tap at the door before the formerly cheerful Mrs. Meal poked her head in. I know this will amaze you, Chief, but we still have 402 blankets stacked up in the tent, in the supply tent, same as yesterday. Jed blinked. Oh, he said. I thought we had a new shipment in. Wasn't there a royal proclamation to that effect? I barely listened to Mrs. Smale's answer. I had to figure out where I would go and what I would do now. Under the circumstances, it seemed too much to expect Jed to let me hang out at the camp. Then I heard him say, Mrs. Smale, may I introduce Ella Brown, our new medical and agricultural advisor. Mrs. Smale's jaw dropped, and her eyes seemed to come very close to jumping out of their sockets. But she was polite enough to say only, Welcome. We're glad to have you. I looked at Jed instead of her as I replied, Thank you. And that is the end of chapter 31. Oh my god, last chapter. Oh. How is this gonna end? How does this end? Yeah, man. Dude. Nice, a really good time with the amount of reading I've done. Okay. So, last chapter. It's gonna be 31. And then I will take a nice shower, because I haven't done that yet. Alright, so chapter 31. As the month, actually before I start reading, I am going to adjust myself again into a more comfier position. There we go. Alright, chapter 31. As the next few months passed, I splintered an amazing number of broken arms. I traded everything from bee stings to gores from a wild boar. I ladled out gallons of soup in the camp's kitchen. One incredible rainy night in a far pasture, I delivered a calf that was trying to be born hind and first. I worked harder than I'd ever worked for Lucille, and every evening I'd spent hours talking to Jed. At first, we were awkward together. What hadn't been decided stood like an uninvited. What hadn't been decided stood like an uninvited guest between us. But then we agreed not to speak of love or marriage or the future until the 6 months were up. Those subjects still crept into our conversations occasionally. Jed would say, when hold on. And suddenly my jaw is like super tired. Imagine that. Those subjects still crept into our conversations. Occasionally. Jed would say, when we're running the camp as partners, and when we have children, that is, or I'd say, what if I decide I want to learn more about being a doctor? Could I do that and be married? Jed would assure me, we can work it out. But because we weren't going to make any decisions for 6 months, most of the time we just talked, as good friends do. I mean, you could also be lovers and Anyway, this is, probably before like casual dating and stuff like that. I don't know. Um, but because we weren't going to make any decisions for 6 months, we can date before marriage. Yeah, exactly. But because we weren't going to make any decisions for 6 months, most of the time we just talked and talked as good friends too. Jed reassured, not Jed, yeah, Jed treasured the philosophy book I'd brought him, and we both took turns puzzling out its meaning. Sometimes, when we were both too exhausted to think, I read stories to him out loud. We debated good and evil, argued about how the Swan War could end. I was, strangely enough, happy. Then one day, while I was checking on patients in the makeshift infirmary, a girl summoned me to the office. Can't it wait? Can't it wait? I asked. I was trying to decide if the feverish baby lying listlessly on the table in front of me had a disease that could spread it through the whole camp. No, the girl said. Master Rustin said now. I turned, except for the war-haunted eyes. Ex- Except for the war-haunted eyes, the girl reminded me of Mary. All right, I said. He'll be fine, I told the baby's mother, with a confident with a confidence I didn't feel. But keep him away from the other children. She stared at me hopelessly. How to keep a baby away from other children when their entire family was sleeping in one bed? I worried about that as much. I worried about that as I walked back to the office. But I forgot my worries when I arrived, and Jed wordlessly thrust a card into my hand. It was thick and luxurious, its words in such fancy script that it took me a few minutes to read them. We regret to inform you of the death of His Excellency, the Lord Maximilian Rustin. Please return to the castle immediately to take over his duties. By a proclamation of King Charming, the 23rd. Oh, Jed, I'm sorry, I said, echoing the useless words that Jed had said to me all those months ago, when I had told him about my father's death. Why? Jed said in a choked voice. Why does it hurt so much? I didn't even like him. But he was your father, I said. Couldn't they have broken the news in a nicer way? Jed asked plaintively. The king could have offered his condolences or something. I thought of Lucille sneering at me. Your father's dead. Get to work. Essentially, that was the king's message too, only in fancier language. I felt grateful once again that I was away from the so-called Charmings, but I still felt bad for Jed. He didn't even seem to have absorbed the second half of the message. It doesn't matter how anyone says it, I said gently. It still hurts. When does it stop hurting? He asked. I don't know, I said. It takes longer than 3 years. And then I hugged him and he hugged me, and it wasn't the least bit romantic. Not like dancing under the stars on a rose-scented night, but it was still the most romantic moment of my life. He pulled back first. I want you to run the camp while I'm away, he said. So he had read the whole note. Why me? I asked. Why not Mrs. Meal? Why not one of the men? You know, Jed said. And I did. Mrs. Meal was too cheerful. unable to understand true problems. The refugees made fun of her behind her back, and the two male workers at the camp had only contempt for the refugees, as though it were their fault for being displaced by the war. So I might be the best choice. But could I do it? Did I want to? You'll have to let them think they have some control, Jed continued. They don't know how young you really are, but still. I nodded knowingly. I'd learned a lot more diplomacy at the camp than at the castle. For how long? I asked. Are you coming back? Something crept into my voice, a hint that I wanted him back for more than the smooth running of the camp. Absolutely, he said firmly. If nothing else, I'll write you. If nothing else, I'll write you for escape tips. And so he rode away, and I missed him, and I waited for him to come back. I remembered what one of my attendants I remembered what one of my attendants back at the castle had said the day of the tournament. This is what women do. We wait. I had vowed to have none of that. But here I was, waiting. Only I wasn't sitting around doing pointless needlepoint. I was binding wounds, ordering supplies, standing up to bitter refugees who questioned why a mere girl should be able to tell them how much firewood they were allowed to have. I fell into bed many nights too exhausted to think. Every once in a while, a strange thought drifted into my head. If I have no life's goal of my own, is it such a bad thing to do the life's work of the man I love? I didn't quite allow myself to think the word love. I thought respect, care about. After a month, a letter arrived from Jed, though it was the middle of the day and I had about 10 days worth of work to do in the next hour. I immediately shut the door of the office and sat down to read. Dear Ella, the castle remains mostly as you remember it. Dull, dreary, obsessed with the most ridiculous I know what that says. Minotaur? Hold on. I think it's minutia, but I'm not sure.
Minutiae.
Minutiae. But I think it's also minutia. Yeah, that's what I thought too. Yeah, minutia. Or minutiae. But I like minutia better. Alright. The castle remains mostly as you remember it. Dull, dreary, obsessed with the most ridiculous minutia. I promise I won't get mushy, but I long to be back at the camp with you. How many people are coming per day? How many have you resettled? Are supplies getting through? If you need to. Here, he scratched something out. I'm sorry. I'm sure you're handling everything fine. I have news that will amuse or be amused or at least interest you. I have found the answer to the mystery about who they found to replace you at the prince's wedding. Are you sitting down? It's your stepsister, Cormund. I dropped the letter in astonishment. After I picked it up, I rubbed my eyes for several minutes, hoping to get them to read properly. But then I looked at the letter again. It still distinctly said Cormund. I, I read on. It was Madame Bassette's idea. A stroke of genius in many respects, I might add. It certainly saved her skin. And yours. I've learned the whole story, mainly by appearing absolutely disinterested. Madame Bassett evidently argued that since you were obviously unredeemable, her words, not mine, they should not bother chasing you. You'd only make more trouble as a wife, and eventually as a mother. Instead, she said, they should go back to the original source. Instead, she said, they should go back to the original source. I thought that would have been an argument for another ball and beauty contests, etc., etc. But the royal advisors all thought that might be too embarrassing. They argued, would anyone want to be the prince's betrothed when the last one had mysteriously disappeared, maybe died? Figuring that only your family could have as much reason as the Charmings to want to keep everything secret. The king's herald went back to your house and swept away the first girl who'd answered the door. Cormund always had been a little quicker on her feet than Griselda. You'll be amused to know that the style now among castlewomen is the fatter the better. Another of Madame Bassette's ideas, I believe. My conjecture is that she took one look at Cormund and decided it would be easier to change the fashion than your sister. After she failed so dramatically trying to change you, Madame Bassett seems a little worn out and more likely to go for the easy solution. So, had I actually changed Madame Bassett instead of the other way around? Was she even becoming flexible? But no, I read on. It sounded like this beauty standard was being enforced as rigidly as the last one. You wouldn't recognize any of your ladies in waiting anymore. They've gained so much weight. I don't think there's a corset left among them. Cyrana and Sympriana eat non-stop, though they have quite a ways to go before they'll be as beautiful as Cormund. Really, you exaggerated somewhat about her appearance. She is not that bad looking if you squint a little. She's brought Griselda and your stepmother into the castle as well. They appear quite happy, and I must say, Cormund and the prince do seem suited to each other. I believe she is with child, though no announcement has been made yet. I leaned back to absorb this incredible news. I could imagine Lucille gloating at the thought of being with her real daughters in the castle while I was who knows where, on the streets perhaps, even dead. I furrowed my brow, trying to figure out what I felt. Was I jealous? I remembered my last taunt to Lucille. I hope you and Cormund and Griselda die in your own filth. But I had been angry then. I no longer wished them ill. I certainly had no desire to be in the castle, and if Cormund and the prince were well suited, more power to them. It was just that, by Lucille's terms, she had won, and I had lost. Only I had no desire to judge myself by Lucille's terms anymore. I skipped ahead, more curious about what Jed was doing than about the Step Evils. I am personally handling all the supply requests. I am personally handling all the supply requests for the camp because no one else cares. They think that now I'm back, the camp has been disbanded. I don't necessarily correct them, though I'd like to. You are right that they allowed me to step up. You are right that they allowed me to set up the camp in the first place only because they wanted me out of the castle. I think Madame Bissette at least guessed that am in love with you, and she knew I wouldn't stand for putting you in the dungeon. I'm surprised they thought I had that much power. Several people have tried to discover if I know where you are now, but of course I'm pretending not to. I did find Mary and thanked her for your help and told her that you're safe. She asked if we were hitched yet. I'm not making this up. I said I'd ask, but you wanted to wait. She said, and I quote, "Me mum says that's the surest way to lose a man." I told her, "Not this man." I also told her if we do get married, our marriage won't be like other people's. You may go off and study and become a full-fledged doctor. We may work as a team on everything. Mary said, and I quote this, "Is that supposed to surprise me? You and the princess have never been like anybody else." But your 6-month deadline is only a month away, and I will probably still be here at the castle then. I could take an exit route similar to yours. I'm not as practiced as walking from the castle to the camp as you are, but I'm sure I could manage. If I played my cards right, I could probably make a more subtle retreat, working my younger brother into this position. I'm pretty sure I could convince the king that Joseph's a better advisor than I am. But I can't leave now, or even a month from now, because I think I can end the Swan War. That is not more important. That is not more important than you or us, but, oh, I think you understand. You are right in all our debates. Ending the war is a better goal than simply helping those hurt by the war. Few people here care either way. If anything, they like having the war around as a top of. If anything, they like having the war around as an interesting topic of discussion. But I've been dropping hints about how much the royal treasury is being drained, how much wealth is being wasted. As you know, they don't care about lives. I think I've convinced the king he could build a more sumptuous palace with the fortune he'd save by ending the war. I've also convinced him to let me lead the peace mission to Swallow. So, I think about you all the time. You there, me here. I miss you. I long to come and get you and run away together, somewhere and forget this stupid kingdom, but I can't. I can't do that and be worthy of you. I think about how you were brave enough to take your fate into your own hands. Not once, but twice. You inspire me. So will you now wait for me? With all my love, Jed. I lowered the letter, feeling torn. So Jed might end the war. Good for him. So I might not see him again for a long time. Bad for me. So I knew now what my answer was going to be. I missed him so much I couldn't stand thinking about it. I closed my eyes and leaned back and thought instead about his belief and I closed my eyes and leaned back and thought instead about his belief that I had single-handedly changed my life. He wasn't entirely correct. The first time I'd gotten help from Jonas, the glass blower, and from the coachman, who undoubtedly undercharged me for driving me to the castle gate. The second time, I never would have gotten out of the dungeon without Mary bringing the shovel and food. If I'd learned nothing else from the refugee camp, it was that even the most independent people sometimes needed help. And if I had learned nothing else in my life thus far, it was that you don't always end up where you think you're going. I smiled faintly, remembering the day I had been swept off the. I smiled faintly, remembering the day I'd been swept off to the castle. Everything had happened in such a blur that even my memories now were mostly just of scattered sensations. The sound of the awestruck crowd whispering as they gathered around the prince's carriage, The feel of the silky dress of this the feel of the silky dress the royal attendants put on me. The sight of the footman bowing low to me, before he helped me into the carriage. I couldn't have said I couldn't have said now he was in the crowd what color the dress was or which hand the footman extended to me. Somehow, only one detail still stood out clearly. I could still hear the voice of the old woman in my village, cackling as I rode by. Now there's one who would live happily ever after. And I remember how fervently I wanted her to believe. And I remembered how fervently I had wanted to believe her. How I had looked out at her wrinkled, wizened face, as if hoping to see the countenance. Hold on. Hold on.
Countenance.
Countenance. Okay. How I had looked at her, and I remember how fervently I wanted to believe her. How I had looked out at her wrinkled, wizened face, as if hoping to see the countenance of a prophet. I was young. I could be excused my foolishness, but evidently the woman's advanced years had not earned her the wisdom she deserved. The last 9 months of my life had hardly contained endless happiness. Let me say that again. The last 9 months of my life had hardly contained happiness. No. Jesus, I can't read. And I'm at the last page and a half. The last 9 months of my life had hardly contained endless happiness, and I had little reason to expect endless happiness in the future. Why did the woman's prediction still haunt me? I stood and walked to the window. Outside, children with ragged clothes, runny noses, and wind-chapped faces were playing a game they'd invented, throwing clods of frozen mud at the roof, and laughing when smaller clumps of dirt rained back down on them. It was an ugly scene. Certainly any of the women back in the castle would have sniffed in disgust and turned back to their fancy silks and satins, their perfect little needlepoint designs. But I saw the joy in the children's eyes, the jubilation on their faces every time a particular big clod broke. I saw, well, beauty. And suddenly, I understood the old woman's prediction in a new light. Happiness is like beauty, in the eye of the beholder. Maybe the old woman could be right in the way she'd never intended. I did know this. I liked my life the way I was living it. I turned from my window and went back to work. And that is the end of Just Ella. Also, go ahead, keep on typing. You were going to type something. Oh, you didn't mean to type anything. I saw you typing something. Alright, I'm going to stop recording. Thank you so much.